Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Please drop a like or comment if you want to help the channel. Now let's get into the true scary stories. The Whispers of Hollow Ridge. The first time I heard the whispers, I didn't think much of them. It was late, past the time the town library should have been empty, but I had always been one of those souls who preferred the quiet corners of Hollow Ridge's vast shelves to the noisy reality outside. I'd been working through stacks of books for research, nothing out of the ordinary, but as the hours dragged on, I began to notice something strange. The silence wasn't as complete as it used to be. There was this soft hum, just on the edge of perception. The sort of thing you almost convince yourself isn't real. Almost. It started softly, a series of hushed murmurs that I thought were my own thoughts swirling in fatigue. But as I sat there, my fingers tracing the spine of an ancient volume on local folklore, the murmur became clearer. "Turn the page," it said. My breath hitched. I froze, telling myself I must have misheard. Libraries have strange acoustics, after all. Sounds bounce in odd ways. But it happened again, a faint voice curling around my thoughts, urging me to continue. "Turn the page." I glanced around nervously, half expecting someone to step out from behind one of the towering shelves. But no one was there. The large, oak-paneled reading room was utterly still, except for the relentless ticking of the old grandfather clock by the entrance. Shaking off the chill that had crept up my spine, I obeyed the voice without thinking, flipping the page as instructed. The leather-bound book felt heavy in my hands, its pages yellowed with age, almost as though it had waited for me all these years. But the more I read, the more the whispers grew insistent, echoing inside my skull. It wasn't just one voice now. It was several, overlapping, and too fast to understand completely. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly on the polished wooden floor. The whispers stopped. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. For a moment, I let myself believe it was over, that it had just been my overworked mind playing tricks on me. Hollow Ridge Library had always felt old, ancient even, with its towering Gothic architecture and endless rows of forgotten books. It was easy to imagine strange things in a place like this. Too easy. But then, something worse happened. As I packed up to leave, the murmurs returned, more pronounced now. The words that reached my ears chilled me to the bone. "He stands." My heart raced. I had just stood up. Was it talking about me? I paused, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. "He looks around," the whisper continued, growing louder. My head snapped toward the source of the sound, and the hair on the back of my neck bristled. There, hidden in the shadows between the bookshelves, I saw something. A figure, no, a shape, moved. Just barely. A part of me knew I should run, but curiosity gripped me like an iron vice. I stepped toward the darkened aisle, my breath shallow and uneven. The shadows swallowed me as I entered the maze of books. The air here was colder, thick with dust and neglect. The whispers had grown softer again, but now they followed my every move, narrating each step I took. "He walks," they hissed. "He searches." I rounded the corner of the aisle and came face to face with nothing. The corridor was empty. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Suddenly, the floor creaked underfoot, and a cold gust of wind rushed past me, blowing out the nearest lamps, plunging the aisle into darkness. The whispers surged. Louder, more frantic. They no longer told me what I was doing. They were telling me what would happen next. "He will not leave," they chorused. "He will see." I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat as the lights flickered back on. My pulse pounded in my ears, but the whispers had grown distant again, as if retreating back into the shadows. Still, the memory of their sinister predictions lingered, clinging to me like the damp chill of the library air. "He will not leave." The words gnawed at my mind. What did they mean? My feet itched to bolt for the door, to escape the growing sense of wrongness in this place. But something else, something darker, held me there. I turned on my heel, walking quickly back to my table in the reading room, intending to pack up and go. But as I reached for my bag, I noticed something strange. A book I hadn't seen before sat on top of my stack. I didn't remember taking it out, nor had I seen it on the shelves earlier. Its cover was plain, bound in dark green leather with no title. Just holding it felt wrong, like it didn't belong in this world. A weight settled in my chest, urging me to leave it behind, but my fingers betrayed me, opening the book to its first page. The first few lines seemed like nothing special, just a record of the library's founding. The handwriting was spidery, the ink faded and nearly illegible. But as I skimmed through the pages, something caught my eye. It was a name. My name. Written in the same strange script, surrounded by other notes that described actions I'd just taken. He stands. He looks around. He walks toward the shelves. The words, exactly as I had heard them whispered, were there in black and white. My heart thundered in my chest as I flipped further, faster, dreading what I would find next. The entries became more erratic, the handwriting more desperate, like the person writing was in a panic. There were phrases that didn't make sense, fragmented thoughts. It watches. I can't escape. The room moves. The pages crackled in my hands as I found the most recent entry. My blood ran cold. He reads this now. He will find the door. No sooner had I read the words than I heard a soft scraping sound behind me, like stone grating against stone. I turned slowly, and there, at the far end of the reading room, something impossible had appeared. A door. It hadn't been there when I'd come in. I was certain of it. The doorway was narrow, carved directly into the stone wall, where before there had only been shelves. A dim, amber light pulsed from beyond it, like a faint heartbeat. My legs trembled as I took a step forward, and the book slid from my hands, forgotten. The whispers grew louder, frantic, desperate, warning me, urging me away. Don't go. Don't follow. But I couldn't stop myself. Something called to me from that doorway, a pull so strong it overrode every sense of fear. The light was hypnotic, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. I had to see what lay beyond. My fingers brushed the edge of the stone doorframe, rough and cold. Without thinking, I stepped through. Instantly, the air changed. It was damp, the smell of mildew thick. I found myself in a long, narrow corridor lined with shelves, but these books weren't like the ones outside. They were older, much older, the leather cracked, the pages yellowed and brittle. The whispers had vanished, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed in on me from all sides. I didn't know where I was or how far this corridor went, but I knew I wasn't alone. There was something here, something watching, waiting in the darkness beyond the flickering light. I stopped abruptly. Ahead, the corridor ended at another door. This one was different. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings, symbols I didn't recognize. My gut screamed at me to turn back, to run before it was too late, but I couldn't. I was too far gone, too deep into whatever nightmare had drawn me here. I reached out, fingers brushing the carved wood, and pushed. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a room bathed in shadow. In the center, an ancient table stood, surrounded by tall shelves packed with books. But my eyes were drawn to the figure seated at the table, hunched over, its face hidden beneath a hood. I stepped forward, heart hammering, unable to stop myself from asking, "Who are you?" The figure didn't move at first, but then, slowly, it turned its head, and I wished to God it hadn't. Its face wasn't human. Its skin was ashen, stretched too tight over sharp, unnatural features. Hollow eyes stared into mine, and then, in a voice that was both a whisper and a scream, it spoke. "You are too late." The figure's voice echoed in the confined space, bouncing off the shelves as if the room itself was alive, pulsing with the same strange rhythm that had drawn me through the corridor. "Too late?" I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. The air had thickened, and each breath felt like I was swallowing dust. The hooded figure's eyes were fixed on me, empty pits that somehow still managed to pin me to the spot. "Yes," it hissed, rising from the chair, its movements unnaturally smooth, almost gliding. "You've already begun the ritual. There is no leaving now." The figure gestured to the shelves around us, and I realized something I hadn't noticed before. These books weren't just abandoned tomes left to rot. They were moving. Slowly, subtly, but definitely moving. Their pages fluttered even though no wind touched them. Some pulsed, as if they were breathing. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What ritual?" My eyes darted around the room, looking for some kind of escape, but the door I had entered through had vanished. In its place stood more shelves, towering over me like a labyrinth that I knew I'd never find my way out of. The creature's face twisted into something that could have been a smile, though it was too grotesque to be certain. "You opened the book," it said, as if that explained everything. "And now, the library has claimed you. This is its domain, and you are its newest keeper." The weight of the words sank in like cold iron. "No," I muttered, shaking my head in disbelief. "That's not possible. I just wanted to read. To understand the whispers." The figure loomed closer, its hollow eyes never leaving mine. "The whispers are the library's will. They called to you, and you answered. You were never meant to leave." It raised a hand, long, bony fingers pointing to the books lining the walls. "Each of these contains the soul of someone who came before you. They too thought they could escape. But they, like you, were wrong." My stomach churned as I backed away, stumbling over a loose stone in the floor. The book's whispers began to rise again, a frantic cacophony, but this time I could understand them. They weren't narrating my actions anymore. They were begging, pleading. Voices of the dead trapped in the pages, echoing in desperation. "I don't want this," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the growing storm of whispers. "There has to be a way out." The figure paused, tilting its head as if considering my words. "There is always a way," it said slowly. "But it will come at a price." Its smile widened, revealing sharp teeth behind the shadow of its hood. "The library always demands a price." "What price?" My voice cracked, fear clawing its way up my throat. I could feel the walls closing in, the oppressive weight of the room's darkness pressing down on me, threatening to smother me if I didn't find a way out. The figure extended its hand toward me, and I felt a strange compulsion to take it. But just as my fingers brushed its cold skin, the room shuddered. The whispers grew into a furious roar, the books vibrating on their shelves, and then, with a loud snap, one of the shelves splintered, spilling books across the floor. "Choose," the figure rasped. "A soul for a soul. If you wish to leave, another must take your place. Otherwise, you will join them." It gestured to the endless rows of books, each one now vibrating violently. The souls inside howled in fury, a terrifying chorus of the damned. I recoiled, my mind racing. Another soul? Who could I possibly sacrifice? But before I could respond, the figure's eyes gleamed with dark amusement. "You've already chosen," it said, its voice thick with malevolent glee. My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. The figure stepped closer, its face inches from mine. "Your research. You've spoken of the library to someone, haven't you?" It whispered. "They will come, just as you did. You led them here. And once they arrive, the library will claim them, and you will be free." My heart pounded as the memory of last week surfaced, when I had mentioned my late-night research sessions to Sarah, the librarian. She had been curious, asking about the strange folklore I was digging into. I hadn't thought much of it then. But now I understood. The figure stepped back, melting into the shadows as the door behind me reappeared, the path back to the library open once again. "Decide quickly," it said, its voice fading into the darkness. "She will come soon." The figure's words echoed in my mind, like a haunting melody that I couldn't escape. "She will come soon. Sarah." The image of her kind smile flashed before my eyes. My stomach twisted with guilt. I'd dragged her into this. Somehow, my curiosity had opened a door not just for me, but for her too. The price was too steep. I couldn't sacrifice someone else. Could I? I stood frozen at the threshold of the reappeared door, staring at the flickering amber light that marked my only way out. The whispers from the shelves had quieted, but they still hummed in the back of my mind, low and persistent. The books were waiting for me to make a choice. Each second that passed felt heavier than the last. My chest tightened with the weight of an impossible decision. In a daze, I took a step toward the door. The figure had retreated into the shadows, but its presence clung to the room like a bitter aftertaste. My heart thudded in my chest, the sound of it echoing in my ears. My body was screaming to leave, to run, but my mind churned with doubt. If I left now, Sarah would take my place. I had to find another way. The library, the books, they had all been there for centuries, longer, perhaps. Surely there was something else, some way to stop this cycle without condemning someone else to this fate. My eyes darted back to the books on the shelves. The souls trapped inside. Could they help me? Could they know another way out? Tentatively, I reached for one of the nearest books. Its spine was cracked and worn, but as my fingers grazed its surface, the whispers surged in response. No, they hissed. Do not open us. My hand froze. I hesitated. Why were they warning me? What were they afraid of? The library had made its demands clear, a soul for a soul. But perhaps these voices, these trapped souls, had once been like me, tricked, desperate, searching for a way out. I pulled the book from the shelf despite their protests. The whispers around me intensified, filling the room with a frenzied energy. I opened the cover, half expecting the room to collapse around me, but instead, the pages glowed with an eerie blue light. As I flipped through them, words leapt off the page, fragments of stories, names, places. And then, hidden among them, a small note in the same ancient handwriting I had seen before. One can break the cycle, but only by taking the library with them. Destroy the heart. The heart? I stared at the words, my pulse quickening. The library had a heart? I thought back to the layout of the rooms, the corridors, and then it struck me. The reading room, the one I had first entered. It had always felt central, somehow. Maybe that was it. But how was I supposed to destroy something so vast, something so ancient? The whispers had grown louder, the voices now pleading. Leave us, they begged. You will only doom us all. But I ignored them, closing the book with a determined snap. I knew now what I had to do. I had to destroy the library itself, and whatever cursed power had kept it alive for so long. My feet moved before my brain had fully processed the danger. I retraced my steps through the hidden corridor and burst through the door back into the main library. The air felt heavier here, thicker, as if the building itself was aware of my intentions. As I moved toward the reading room, the ground trembled beneath me. The library was reacting, resisting my presence. Shadows flickered along the walls, creeping toward me, but I kept moving. The whispers from the bookshelves turned into agonized screams, filling my ears until I thought my head might split open from the noise. I finally reached the center of the reading room. The grandfather clock's ticking was deafening, each second counting down as if the library was toying with me. Destroy the heart, I repeated under my breath, scanning the room for anything that stood out. Then I saw it, the clock. My eyes locked on the old, towering grandfather clock. I had dismissed it before, but now I saw it clearly. Its pendulum was moving too fast, ticking erratically, like the frantic heartbeat of something alive. Of course. The clock was the heart of this cursed place. It had been watching me all along. I grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it at the clock with all my strength. The glass shattered, the sound reverberating through the room. The whispers exploded into a chaotic roar, and the walls began to crack, spider webbing outward from the clock's face. The entire library shuddered, as if screaming in pain. The floor beneath me quaked violently. Books tumbled from the shelves, and dust filled the air. The pendulum inside the clock had stopped, its rhythmic ticking silenced for the first time in what felt like centuries. But the destruction didn't stop. The room was collapsing in on itself. I could feel the pull of the library's power, like gravity tugging at my soul, trying to draw me back in. Just as I thought it would consume me too, the door, the real door, appeared. The entrance I had come through when I first arrived in Holleridge Library, now glowing with an otherworldly light. I sprinted toward it, my legs barely carrying me fast enough. Behind me, the shelves crumbled, the whispers turned to screams, and the room imploded into nothingness. I leapt through the door just as everything went dark. I woke up outside, sprawled on the cold stone steps of the library. The sky above me was clear, stars twinkling as if nothing had happened. I sat up, shaking, unsure if I had escaped, unsure if any of it had been real. But when I looked at the library's towering facade, I knew it was gone. The windows were dark, the whispers silenced forever. I was free. Or so I thought. Behind me, a soft voice broke the silence. I knew you'd be here. I turned, my blood running cold. Sarah stood at the bottom of the steps, her eyes wide with curiosity, her arms clutching a book. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. Echoes of the Static. I found the radio buried deep in the attic, tucked away behind a pile of dusty boxes and forgotten memories. It was an antique, one of those heavy old machines with wooden knobs and brass accents that my grandfather used to listen to every night. He loved that thing, but after he passed, it had been tossed aside like the rest of his belongings. The attic was musty, filled with that familiar scent of old wood and forgotten belongings. I wiped a thick layer of dust off the radio's surface, my fingers tracing the intricate carvings along its edges. It had always been broken, at least, that's what I remembered. The last time anyone tried to use it, it had just emitted a low hum, static crackling beneath it, refusing to catch any signal. But something drew me to it that day. Maybe it was the quietness of the house, or maybe I just wanted a distraction from the loneliness that had been creeping in since I moved back in. I brought the radio downstairs, placing it on the kitchen table. For a moment, I just stared at it, debating whether to plug it in. The air felt different around it, heavier, as if something was watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. With a deep breath, I finally gave in, connecting the radio to the old outlet near the wall. Nothing. The dials clicked, the static hummed, but no music, no voices. Just the same dead air as always. Disappointed, I turned the knob to the off position and left it there, thinking it would remain as silent as it had for years. That night, the first night in a long time I spent alone, I woke to the sound of a faint crackle. My eyes shot open, the clock on the wall reading exactly midnight. At first, I thought it was just the wind or maybe the pipes groaning in the old house. But as I lay there, the sound became clearer, more distinct. The static was coming from downstairs, from the radio. Slowly, I made my way down the creaky stairs, the darkness swallowing me whole as I approached the kitchen. The radio was on. The dials glowed softly in the dark, but no station played, just the low hum of static that seemed to echo through the room. Then, between the static, I heard it, a voice, barely audible, buried beneath the noise. It was my voice. I froze at the kitchen doorway, my breath catching in my throat. The voice on the radio, faint but unmistakable, was mine. The words, though distorted, were phrases I had spoken only yesterday. I leaned in closer, straining to make sense of the fragmented sentences. Should probably clean the attic. Been years since anyone. The sound of me rummaging through the attic echoed through the speakers, followed by the same frustrated sigh I had let out when I found the radio. But then something changed. The voice shifted slightly, still mine, but the tone was wrong. It was colder, almost detached, as though someone was mimicking me rather than replaying my words. And I shouldn't have come back, the voice said, flatly. I hadn't said that. My heart thudded in my chest. Had I thought that? The thought had crossed my mind in a fleeting moment of doubt, but I hadn't spoken it aloud. At least, I didn't think I had. Suddenly, the radio crackled again, louder this time, and the voice began to unravel, breaking apart in eerie, drawn-out syllables. The static drowned out the words, and the radio cut off abruptly with a loud pop. Silence swallowed the room. I stood there, staring at the still radio, unsure if I should turn it back on or smash it to pieces. A loud knock at the front door made me jump, the sound reverberating through the quiet house. It was late, far too late for visitors, and my stomach churned with a growing sense of unease. I hesitated, wondering if I had imagined it, but the knock came again, insistent. I inched my way to the door, each step feeling like it was pulling me deeper into something I didn't understand. I opened it slowly, the old hinges creaking as I peered out into the night. No one was there. Only the wind whistling through the empty street greeted me. I stepped outside, scanning the front yard, but nothing moved in the darkness. Still, something was off. The air was too still, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. As I turned to go back inside, I noticed something on the porch, an old, faded photograph. It hadn't been there when I arrived. My hands shook as I bent to pick it up, my fingers trembling against the worn edges. It was a photo of my grandfather, sitting in his favorite chair, the very same radio beside him, glowing softly. But there was something else in the photo, a shadow, barely visible, standing behind him. It was tall, its outline blurred as though it had been caught mid-motion, watching him. Watching me. Before I could process what I was seeing, the radio crackled to life again behind me, loud and insistent. The whispering voices began once more, and this time, they weren't just mine. I slammed the door shut, the old photograph still clenched in my hand. My pulse was racing as I backed away, my eyes darting between the radio and the door. The voices had returned, growing louder now, a distorted blend of my own words and something far more sinister. They were no longer just memories from yesterday, they were speaking directly to me. "You're not alone," the voice on the radio whispered. This time, it wasn't a thought I recognized. My knees nearly buckled as a cold dread washed over me. The voices overlapped, repeating fragments of conversations I'd had with myself, things I never spoke out loud, things I buried deep in my mind. Desperation took over, and I lunged at the radio, yanking its plug from the wall. The voices stopped instantly, but the silence that followed was almost worse. I stood there, breathing heavily, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But the house was quiet again, save for the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears. I looked down at the photograph still clutched in my hand. The shadowy figure behind my grandfather seemed to shift in the dim light of the kitchen. My eyes traced the outline of the figure, and my stomach tightened as I realized something unsettling. It wasn't just a shadow. It had a shape, a form, but its features were blurred, as if the camera had captured something it shouldn't have. It looked almost human, but not quite. Something was wrong with its proportions. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, even now. I turned the photo over. There, in my grandfather's shaky handwriting, were the words, "Do not trust it." A loud thud upstairs sent a jolt of terror through me. I looked up toward the ceiling, dread pooling in my stomach. The sound wasn't random, it was deliberate, like something had just moved. I stared at the dark staircase leading up to the attic, the place where I'd found the radio. My gut twisted in fear, but I knew I had to go up there. I needed to know what I had awakened. Slowly, I made my way upstairs, each creak of the floorboards sounding like a death knell. The door to the attic was ajar, though I was certain I had closed it earlier. I stepped inside, the dim light from the hallway casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The radio wasn't there anymore. In its place was an old mirror I had never seen before, covered in a thick layer of dust. As I wiped the surface clean, my reflection stared back at me, distorted and wrong. My face looked familiar, but something was off. The eyes were darker, the expression more hollow, almost predatory. And then the reflection moved. It didn't match my movements, it was slower, deliberate. It smiled, a twisted, sinister smile. I stumbled back, but the figure in the mirror remained, staring at me with that unnatural grin. Behind it, in the reflection, I saw the shadow from the photograph. It was standing right behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest, but there was nothing behind me. Only the empty attic, still and silent. Yet the cold, creeping sensation of being watched lingered, suffocating the air. My pulse raced as I backed away from the mirror, my eyes glued to the reflection. The figure behind me had vanished, but my own distorted image still lingered in the glass, grinning unnaturally. I could feel it, something just beyond the boundary of the reflection, waiting. "Don't trust it," my grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. His warning scribbled on that photograph seemed more dire now. My hand trembled as I fumbled for the door handle, desperate to get out of the attic. But as I turned, the door slammed shut on its own, trapping me inside. I grabbed the handle, yanking it with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping so fast that I could see my breath in front of me. And then, the radio. The radio that I had unplugged downstairs crackled to life again, its static filling the air like a presence. "You're too late," my voice whispered from the radio, echoing through the room. I froze, my hands still clutching the door handle. The voice, my voice, sounded calm, too calm. And then it spoke again, clearer this time, a low and sinister murmur. "You should have never come back here." The lights flickered, and in the mirror, my reflection stood still, no longer mimicking my movements. Its grin widened, eyes dark and lifeless. The room grew darker, shadows stretching across the walls as the static from the radio became deafening. The voice, my voice, kept speaking, but it was no longer speaking to me. It was speaking about me. She doesn't know. She doesn't remember, it whispered. But we do. We remember everything. The mirror began to shimmer, the reflection warping and twisting as if the glass were water. I backed away, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. I hadn't come back to this house because I wanted to. It had called to me, something in the back of my mind, something I had tried to forget. But now I couldn't escape it. The house. The radio. The mirror. It was all connected, tied to something dark, something I had been too afraid to face. Suddenly, the attic filled with whispers, not just from the radio, but from all around me. They were angry, accusing. They knew me. They knew my secrets, the ones even I had forgotten. And then, one voice stood out, louder than the rest, cold and clear. "It's time to remember," it hissed. I turned toward the mirror just in time to see my reflection step out of the glass. It moved toward me with slow, deliberate steps, its dark eyes locking onto mine. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. It reached for me, its hand cold and unnatural as it touched my skin. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and then the lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. I felt it, the reflection, or whatever it was, pulling me toward the mirror. The cold grip of its hand tightened, and I could feel the world slipping away, reality distorting as the mirror began to swallow me whole. The last thing I saw before everything went black was my own face staring back at me from the other side, trapped in the glass, screaming silently. And then the radio crackled one last time, the voice barely a whisper. "We remember." The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.